This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. Yeah, I've been away for a little bit. Thank you to those of you who noticed. Those of you who wrote to me, asked if I was doing okay. I appreciate that too. Whoever it was who sent the police to do the welfare check, okay, you might want to back it off just a little bit. A little concern is good. That's over the line, though. So I'm happy to catch up with my friend Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. Eric, it's been a couple of weeks since we talked. A lot has happened. First of all, let me ask, how are you?
Well, I'm okay, and I'm kind of jealous. I wish I, too, could have retreated to an undisclosed location for a couple of days.
I'll tell you, man, what I did was probably some of the hardest physical labor that I have done in years, and it was miserable most of the time, but I was also unplugged from the doom cycle, which is just repeated every 24 hours, in our news media.
Absolutely.
And that was surprisingly refreshing. There was a lot that was right with the world, even if I wasn't necessarily comfortable, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I feel as though we're caught up now in a cycle where every 6 hours the world is going to end for some other reason. So I can't even cut the grass, before I have to figure out how to try to make some sense of the chaos that's going on.
So let's, I don't even know the best place to begin. Big developments in the Israel-Iran war. Now the U.S. has dropped bombs on Iran, and then we're told, but now a ceasefire has been brokered, and the real serious Trump acolytes are saying, see, we told you, he knew exactly what he was doing. Although you just told me the ceasefire apparently has been broken as quickly as it arrived.
Well, let's start with the ceasefire having been imposed. As far as I know, it wasn't agreed to by either side. Trump just declared it. I have declared peace, kind of like a Roman Caesar,
wow.
After making a desert. Apparently, the Iranians, however, haven't gone along with it, and the latest is that they lobbed some more missiles, and the Israelis are getting ready to lob some back. And I caught a presser. Well, it was more Trump was heading off to Marine One, getting ready to board his helicopter, talking to the media, and he said they don't know what the F they're doing. Can you imagine Ronald Reagan saying that? I know we're getting old, but it just astounds me to hear the President of the United States let loose with expletives like that. That would have been unimaginable 40 years ago.
I have to tell you, I was more than a little bit alarmed at the chest thumping and that sense of I don't know what you would call it, that sense of I rubbed up against somebody important, when wow, we blew something up, therefore America is great. And look, I'm not trying to say America isn't a great country, it hasn't done great things, but what we do militarily around the world, I don't think a person with a conscience can look at that objectively and not see that our government has engaged us in so much mischief and mayhem, and it's done in our name.
Amen. And also this infantile and gratuitous braggadocio that Trump is infamous for. I can't remember exactly how he put it, but he made some demeaning, derogatory statement publicly about Iran and Iranian leadership, as if any of that is necessary. If we're wanting peace, if we're wanting things to settle down, you have to mock them and belittle them, and as you say, walk around, saying how great you are and beating your chest like some kind of deranged gorilla.
I hate to bring this up because some people will think, oh man, you've crossed the Rubicon by suggesting such a thing, but it makes me think of Apollo Creed in Rocky IV as he's taunting Ivan Drago,
yes.
and just so in control. Yeah, this is my kingdom here. And then out of nowhere, he's done. And I'm not wishing for this to happen, but I'm saying that level of pride typically doesn't take you to good places.
It doesn't. It's arrogant and it's needless. He can feel whatever he wants and perhaps in private, discreetly have conversations among his own people. But to do this publicly it's worrisome that he would do it, in my opinion. It just says that he's not being prudent. He's not being responsible. He's not being mature. Nobody wants this. It's going to not only potentially destroy the world, but before it does that, it is going to destroy whatever MAGA is. It already has managed to completely fracture and split the coalition that resulted in him beating Kamala Harris, because there are a lot of people, and I'm among them, who are beginning to regret having voted for him, because I certainly didn't vote for the United States getting involved in more regime changes around the world.
Right, right. And it's telling too that the right, or at least some on the right, have that sense of, well, as long as we're in power, it must be right. And isn't that what we just got through experiencing in spades over the last 4 years with Joe Biden in power? Well, we have the power, we better use it.
And it's also immeasurably short-sighted. Trump had this window to reverse the precedents that were being set, that power flows from the barrel of the gun, and we can do whatever we want to because we have our hands on the lever of power. He had a great opportunity to try to steer the ship back on course towards something resembling a constitutional republic where the federal government is obliged to abide by the laws. I think Thomas Massey has made an excellent point and a brave stand, pointing out that who is Trump to just unilaterally decide to bomb another country that hasn't attacked us on behalf of Israel? This is just profoundly unconstitutional, let alone immoral. And of course, now Trump is attacking Massey with the ferocity that he attacked Kamala Harris.
Isn't that something? Yeah, so I guess safe to say, I'll just speak for myself. My confidence that we're going to see any kind of positive influence assisting the cause of freedom out of Washington, D.C., that confidence is pretty much gone. It's on us. We're going to have to save ourselves. And yep. I don't mean to be grim-faced and, well, therefore we're doomed. I'm just saying, don't waste your time waiting for someone in the Beltway to give you permission to be free.
That's true, and accepting the reality of the situation that we live in, which is that the federal government is now so corrupted by money and influence peddling that it's probably not salvageable. A lot of people will talk about Israel having an overweening influence over the federal government through AIPAC, but it's not just them. It's the so-called defense apparatus. Why do you think Lindsey Graham has got such a war boner for all of this? That's his primary source of funding, the neocons. Nikki Haley, all of these people, they're all on the take one way or another. The entire federal government is a gigantic grift, and it's all about who can pay what to get what out of us. You and me get to pay for it.
Yep. And I know, like a lot of people, I too have the question, okay, but now what? Trump came in with Elon Musk and they were swinging, and here was Doge and uncovering all this fraudulent funding. And, the only thing I can point to is just look at the actual results, look at the actual actions taken, and ask yourself if this seems like, a regime that's committed to making necessary changes, or if they're just, if the corruption's just under new management.
Yeah, it was a great 30 days, wasn't it? Remember the heady days, after the inauguration when we got to see what USAID was spending our money on, and there was talk about abolishing the Department of Education at the federal level. And everybody got excited, me too. What great news. And then it just went away. I mean, it's literally a show. I feel as if I'm a kid in high school again watching Hulk Hogan wrestle the Iron Sheik.
No, I think that's probably a pretty accurate depiction. At least, in the case of, Hulk Hogan versus the Iron Sheik, there was some entertainment value too, and they didn't, in their hearts, they knew it was a script. Sometimes I wonder about these politicians.
And at least we did freely pay to see it. Those of us who went to watch one of those matches, whereas now we're compelled to watch this match that we're made to pay for that has potentially awful consequences for everybody.
So I feel like we have identified, the problem is there. It's real. Accepting the reality of it, that's a necessary step. Let's talk a little bit about, on the individual level, some of the things that each one of us can be doing day to day to improve our position to where it matters less and less who sits in the Oval Office and dictates this or dictates that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we can do, boy, this is such a complicated subject, isn't it, is to minimally try to figure out a way to shore up our own households. Yeah. One thing I think is very important is to try at this moment in time to live beneath our means where we can and to avoid debt so that we don't find ourselves in a position, should the economy really go south, of being in hock to these banksters and unable to pay for the necessaries of life. And I think that to the extent that we can, preparing for potential eventualities by acquiring skills, by learning how to do things for ourselves, by being less dependent on anything that is centrally controlled would behoove us.
I feel like I can speak to this one now since I'm actively doing it, and I wouldn't just be hypocritically telling, everybody, we should get off our butts and get out there and move around more. But I've spent the last few weeks doing some conditioning for this outing I had last week. In just over 3 days, we walked 30 miles and maybe a bit more. And this is in
I bet that felt good, even if you were really tired at the end of it.
Oh yeah, and this was in mountainous terrain, lots of elevation change. There was heat, 90 degrees, dry heat, but still it was, dusty, hard work. And at the time it was very miserable. And even conditioning for it was pretty miserable at times. But now that I am in motion and have been in motion regularly, I'm really appreciating how important that physical health is. And I'm encouraging people, even as I'm trying to do this, become rugged. This is the time.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Both for physical and for mental reasons.
Yes.
People who know me know that I'm an avid runner. Every other day I go out and run 4 or 5 miles. And it's not just the physical conditioning that I get out of that. It's also the psychological conditioning. Just being out. I'm lucky in that I have some land and I've been able to carve out a half-mile trail through the woods and the fields that I loop. And it's just me out there with nature, with the sun, with the animals. And I find it extraordinarily calming to do something like that.
Yep. I've had some very comfortable years, done a lot of push-aways from the table, and man, I'll tell you, I paid for that. But I'm convinced that this is what you mentioned about get your financial house in order, developing skills to, I love how Andy Frisella puts it. The ultimate form of rebellion, basically, he says, is you become a truly excellent person, meaning you can think for yourself, act for yourself, invest for yourself, and provide for yourself. You don't need someone else to do it.
Yep. The less you have need for them, the less they're able to control you. And I think one of the keys to that is to shed the passivity that they instill in people from a very young age. This is the whole purpose, in my opinion, of the government schooling system is passivity. To cultivate in the minds of kids as they grow up that they should just sit still and wait to be told what to think and what to do, rather than thinking for themselves and taking action according to their own judgment.
Hear, hear. Yep. It's, I think you had mentioned, the mental resilience and toughness that we need to develop. I think right now that we're in a situation where nobody really knows which way things are going to shake out. The confidence that's being shown by, for instance, the Trump administration, this ceasefire, why, His Majesty has done this. And I'm sorry, but there are people who are really getting that cocky. But
yeah,
we don't know how things are going to shake out, and things that we take for granted could become very scarce or very expensive or both, in a very quick, period of time. So,
yep, and I don't think we should allow ourselves to be undermined by the psychological battering of this chaos that they keep visiting on us. And Trump is a part of this. It's just constant hitting people with stress and fear about this is going to happen, that's going to happen. The enemies of freedom. I heard Holman, the border czar guy, talking about how there's sleeper cells now that are activated in the country. It echoes of what we dealt with during the reign of George W. Bush, and I'm just so sick and freaking tired of it. And I'm tired of the cockiness and the arrogance of it. Do you remember the Hunt for Red October where the Soviet sub commander that they sent to go after Sean Connery's character, his own arrogance ended up causing his sub to get destroyed by its own missile? And I feel like that's where we're headed. Yep.
It's I don't want to be a source of fear or a source of gloom to people, but the situation's serious. But I also would encourage build partnerships with people and trust. And there's a time to lone wolf McQuade your way through life. This is probably not one of them. I was with a group of about 275 people. Moving through all this mountainous terrain with hand carts and, the logistics to keep everybody fed, to keep everybody hydrated and, from being blistered up and stuff were just incredible. But I saw people working to help one another, and it made a situation where everybody was a little bit miserable because it was hot. I mean, it was really, not comfortable. But when you're focused on helping other people, you have purpose. You're not likely to become predatory or feral, as the case may be.
Well, sure. And, something I learned from living in the country versus living in the suburbs where I used to live and growing up in the suburbs, people in the country tend to know their neighbors better. And that's a really good thing, particularly if a crisis situation helps. You know each other, you know you're not an enemy of the other, and you're more likely to help one another again if things get difficult. Whereas in the suburbs, you could be 10 feet away from the next door neighbor, and other than maybe waving to them every once in a while, you have no idea who those people are, and they have no idea who you are.
Well, and I would offer one other thought, and I realize this is like biting the hand that feeds me, but take a break every so often. Seriously, put down the screen and go walk outside, look at the stars, do something other than let that screen be your portal to what reality is.
Absolutely. Pot calling the kettle black. I'm in the same boat. You and I do this for a living, so we're kind of chained to it. But for the people listening who aren't, that's really good advice.
Well, and even you and I, like when you go out for a run or something like that, I mean, do you have stuff blasting in your ear, or do you listen?
Never. I mean, it's just me and the sounds that are naturally occurring out in the woods.
See, that's the kind of stuff. Even in small doses, I believe we all need that from time to time because, as you mentioned it, that contrived doom that's being focused on us. It's not to inform us. It's not to make us smarter or more aware. It's to beat us down.
Yeah. One of my favorite authors, H.L. Mencken, said more than 100 years ago that the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace constantly alarmed and thus clamorous to be led to safety.
I love Mencken. I think he's
too. Yep.
Tremendously under-celebrated, but people who love freedom tend to actually be a pretty good repository of Mencken quotes. At least that's been my observation.
Yep, that's what they should be having kids read in school. But of course, the government school would never do that.
So we've got a few minutes here, Eric. I want to close on kind of an automotive note.
Sure.
Of all the things that you've been testing and evaluating and writing about lately, any particular standouts you'd like to share with us?
Well, yeah, interestingly, I'm driving a Ram 2500 this week, which, unlike the half-ton trucks, comes standard with a V8 that you can't even get anymore in a lot of half-ton trucks, as well as a regular cab option and an 8-foot bed option, which are also two other things that are getting hard to find in the half-ton truck segment. Now, this one also has the optional diesel engine. And when they dropped it off, literally the day I got in it, I turned it on and I get this warning thing in the dashboard about how if I don't fill the DEF tank within 150-something miles, the truck is going to reduce speed to a maximum of 5 miles an hour. So, this is one of the things that afflicts diesel-powered vehicles now. You're required to put in this DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, and if you don't, your punishment is that the vehicle effectively becomes useless. It's kind of like a brick EV, except the upside is at least you can hoof it down the road to a place that sells the DEF and bring it back. It's hard to do that with kilowatt hours.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I drive a vehicle that uses DEF, and I have that same frustration. So, off the record and strictly in a hypothetical sense, Eric, is it possible for someone to jailbreak the computer program to where DEF is not needed?
Yes, it's very possible. DEF is not needed, period. It's just another one of these things that are imposed on people in the name of decreasing emissions, but it's really about just making the vehicle less appealing and more expensive. So, yeah, you can delete, that's the term, delete the DEF system, and what you end up with is a vehicle that gets better mileage, is more reliable, has fewer maintenance hassles down the road. And I highly recommend doing it because, you can get away with it, to use the language that they gaslight us with, because a heavy-duty truck, that is anything in the 2500 class and up, doesn't have to worry about going in for exhaust emissions testing. So, mum's the word. As long as you don't tell them, no one's going to ask.
Well, I'm looking at your article, and I got to tell you, that is a beautiful truck. But
it's a horse.
I still feel a little bit of this lament that the V8 is becoming a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm. And particularly a big V8. This is what trucks used to come with, not 2500s, but 1500 trucks used to come with big V8s. Well, you can still get it in the 2500s because, again, the regulatory compliance pressures applied to the 2500s and up isn't yet as extreme as it is for the half-ton class. The reason the half-ton class is now largely bereft of V8 engines, I think, the Ford and the Chevy are the only ones, and they're optional. They don't come with them anymore, except in the higher trim examples. It's because the federal government makes it almost impossible to put those things in trucks, and certainly in any truck that you and I could afford.
Hear, hear. Eric, great as always to catch up with you. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about this time next week, assuming that the world is still intact.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
All right, looking forward to it. You will find a link to Eric's website in my show notes at thebryanhydeshow.com. These are show notes for June 24th, 2025.
This is The Bryan Hyde Show.